Hello, friends, and happy Monday. Welcome to Verbal to Visual, the live show. Thanks for hanging out today. Hello to Julie. Thanks for saying that hiya in the text chat. Love to hear a hello from everyone that's watching. So drop us a hello in the text chat. Let us know how things are going today. I'm going to do a little bit of a warm-up sketch here, and we'll make our way into today's live stream, which is a Q&A episode. If you've got a question about sketchnoting, today is a good day to bring it in, and we can explore it together. We can sketch it out. Gonna start with just a person here saying hello. Could represent me, could also represent you. We'll make it a nice big welcome sign here. Hope that you had a good weekend. Maybe had the chance to rest up a bit. Maybe get some projects done. Maybe do a little bit of learning that doesn't feel too much like work. That's what someone who spent some time inside of Verbal to Visual working through some courses mentioned in a comment. Doing some sketchnoting practice over the weekend. I enjoy kind of practicing and learning new things over the weekend, so long as it doesn't feel like work. Any time I try to push myself and do work over the weekend, I feel like more often than not it just backfires and kind of removes that opportunity for rest over the weekend, which we all need. So, gonna have an opportunity here for folks to bring in questions they have about sketchnoting. So, if you would like to ask a question that's been on your mind lately about building or using your sketchnoting skills, that's what today is for. I've got a few kind of queued up that have come in through comments recently. So we've got some starting points, but if at any point you want to share a question that you've been thinking about, ask something that would help you move forward with your sketchnoting skill development, or the specific thing that you're using your sketchnoting skills for. I think that's what's probably the most fun for me to chat about is, when you have that context for what someone is doing with their sketchnoting skills, because it's such a versatile tool that has all these potential uses. Getting to know the specific thing that you're doing with your skills, and what we might be able to do, suggestions that myself and maybe folks in the comments might be able to provide to help you continue moving forward with whatever it is you're working on. Today is Monday, March 15th, 2021. Let's try to kick the week off right. Kick the morning off right with my second cup of coffee too. Welcome to Sharu, Aurora. Hello to you as well. Julie coming in with the first question, which I love it. It's a great topic. So let's start there. Julie asks, what are your favorite warm-up routines before a sketchnoting session? Great. First question to kick off the live stream too. In other formats, today's format for the live stream is just like get into some questions right away. But in previous versions of this live stream, I kind of the first segment, I like to have the first segment be some sort of warm up, some combination of like a little bit of warm up and maybe like a tiny bit of skill building. So I think that's kind of the role that I can see a warm-up routine playing, starting with just like maybe getting your mind and hand, body ready to work with ideas in a more visual way. But depending on how you set it up, you can also have a little bit of a skill building component to it. So let's brainstorm potential components for warm-up routines for Sketchnoter specifically. The first place I like to start is I'm just going to call it like random marks. So I think the thing that's potentially challenging about sketchnoting compared to maybe the form of note-taking or idea capturing that you're used to. If you're anything like me, your background, you're used to working with words. So like a challenging aspect of sketchnoting is doing more drawing and just making different types of marks on the page. So this category of warm-up, making random marks, is just a way for you to get comfortable making different types of marks on the page. So let me use the gray here. I have this like specific sequence of marks that I tend to make. I don't remember why I started doing it in this way, but starting with some circles grouped together, a little bit different size. But then around those circles, some clouds. And I like the kind of maintaining this circular approach because you get used to making marks kind of at like different angles. And then after that, I do maps. And again, different directions, different orientations. Maybe alternating short line, long line. And that kind of has gotten, even just doing that, gets your hand doing, making these different types of marks, getting comfortable sketching things out instead of just writing things out. So that's one form of like random mark making, but you could also just like, I don't know, practice doing some squiggles, some sharp lines, some longer lines, some basic shapes. Things like that. Don't even like worry about writing letters or drawing specific things. Just make some marks. Another category of, oops, I'm trying to, I've got a slightly different tool set that I need to get comfortable with. Kind of arrange, maybe this can be something that I show you if folks are interested. I arranged my concepts toolbar in a way that should remove the need to change colors. Like I've set up my tools so that when within like the tool selection portion of concepts itself, I have like all the colors, all the different tools that I need. So I'm trying to get better at tool switching on a digital device. After some random marks, the alphabet is always a great go-to. This is a way if you feel like your handwriting is not as clean as you want it to be. Here's your chance. Let's stick with gray for consistency. Here's your chance just to like practice all your letters. Maybe in a couple different fonts. So that's what I would consider to be my core font. Let's make it a little bit interesting and bring in kind of more of a bubble font. Like, I don't use this font a ton. I'm going to give myself plenty of space here. I don't use this font a lot for live sketchnoting because these letters take time, and I also haven't even like practiced them that much. But if you've got a little bit more time, and maybe for like the title of your sketch note, this style of text might be good. I think I use this one for the title of a recent video about the 4 philosophies of deep work. I think you'll see this font like in the center of that sketch note. Oh, K's are hard. I'm trying to stay kind of consistent with my letter height using the dot grid that I have going within concepts here. I'm also a little more like zoomed out for the purposes of kind of the live stream than maybe I usually would be. It's good practice though. Now, if I were treating this more as a skill building session and not just like a warm-up session, I might go through and like pick a couple of letters to practice. And maybe if it's a warm-up, you could do this with just one. Like that K didn't look so great. So I think I'll practice the K again. Let's practice the R. Maybe the Q. I'll just rotate through those 3 a few more times for a little bit of extra practice. And slow down a little bit. Like with that warm-up, I was going pretty fast, which eventually you want to get to that place where you don't really have to think too much about what you're doing. And also knowing with bubble letters, like with R's and with B's, like giving yourself enough, making those rounded parts big enough so that you have enough space to go in and add the inner part of those bubble letters. So the alphabet is a great thing to include within a warm-up. I also love sketching out some icons, practicing your visual vocabulary, and kind of with the alphabet too. Like start with ones that you're familiar with. Probably 90% of the time I would start with a light bulb. I don't know why I want to stay consistent with the gray color, but I do. To a light bulb, maybe go with a book. Let's go with a pencil. Normally I draw the pencil kind of up and down, so here I'll try it side to side just for a little bit of variation. Draw a couple familiar icons. And maybe throw a few people in there too. Especially if you like identify if there's a thing that you want to start including in your sketch notes that you typically don't, build that sketchnoting element into your warm-up routine. And this could be an example of like, I usually don't take the time to draw stick figures, or stick figures scare me. So I'm less likely to include them in my sketch notes. Start throwing those into your warm-up routine, and then like you'll be primed to use them during the sketchnoting session. So let's draw some running. What could be kind of a I don't want to go too far in the realm of like skill building, but I'm also trying to like do something I don't typically do here. Someone exclaiming, "Hey, look at me." Throwback to a webinar from a little while back. Someone sitting down and meditating, perhaps. There we go. There's a little bit of skill building I was looking for. And then maybe this next part is maybe less about warm-up routine and more about like prepping yourself for the sketchnoting session itself. But kind of prior to a sketchnoting session, I think it's super helpful to like define for yourself what it is you want to get out of that sketchnoting session. So like identify the purpose of it, identify the intent, because I often think of the intent. Oh, here I go, adjusting because I want to stay consistent with color scheme. Here the idea is decide like what do you want to get out of this sketchnoting session. What's the purpose of it? Because what that can help you to do helps you decide which ideas you don't need to worry about capturing on the page and which you do. So you might have heard me talk about this concept of using your intent as a filter. It's a way to filter out what goes on the page and what doesn't. I feel like that's a pretty good starting point. Lots of ideas, I hope, to work into your warm-up routine. Maybe starting with some random marks, getting used to making marks that aren't just letters, but then swinging back to that comfortable place of letters with your alphabet, maybe practicing a new font that you might like to incorporate. You could do a little drawing, get some icon work in, maybe help yourself weave new types of visuals, maybe drawing people, for example. Prime yourself for that. And then maybe as the last stage in a warm-up, as you kind of like bridge the gap between your warm-up and your actual sketchnoting session, just write out or sketch out the purpose, the intent behind this upcoming sketchnoting session, and keep that intent in mind throughout the sketchnoting session itself. If you have other suggestions for things that you might include within a warm-up, throw them in the comments. I'm going to have a sip of coffee, take a look at the text chat, and see where we might like to go next. Hello to Benoit. Good to see you here this morning. Welcome to Mr. M and maybe your whole class too. Also good to see you here. Ooh, Julie brings up a good point, that the mark making section, and really like any of these sections, could also be a time to practice the tool switching, which I mentioned, like how I'm trying to get better at like switching tools instead of like switching colors. I do this like regularly during the live streams here. Like I mean to just switch to a different tool and I accidentally like switch the color instead. So incorporating something into your warm-up that has that element of tool switching, just to like get your brain doing that the right way. I love that. I think I will swing to Mr. M's question next. Who asks, do you have a suggested approach for organizing your sketch notes for the subject of history? Perhaps a timeline format. Yeah, let's explore that. Wavering on a title for this section of our Q&A. I'll keep it simple. Sketchnoting history. This is kind of a fun one. If you're newer to my work and haven't seen it yet, I put together a resource kit for educators. I specifically had kind of like middle school and high school educators in mind. Within that resource kit, I've got like these individual skill building lessons designed for you to be able to play those lessons within your classroom, which I hope kind of makes it easier to introduce your students to sketchnoting. But then I also spend some time exploring like what sketchnoting might look like in different subject areas, because that's a kind of fun way to see like, okay, what might sketchnotes in a biology classroom look like compared to sketchnotes in a history classroom, compared to a journalism classroom. So I like doing deep dives like this because I think it can help teachers and students get a better picture for what it might look like in their specific setting. And as Mr. M mentioned, I think timeline is a spectacular format. Let's go with a slightly different. Am I shooting myself in the foot by going with a slightly different color scheme for this section? We'll find out. Yeah, timelines are great because they give you this sense of how things went down during any given period of time. And this could be a good, if you happen to have like a digital tool where you can grow that timeline. I think what's tricky about a timeline is like giving yourself the amount of space that you need to capture everything. So if there's a way that you have kind of a flexible tool, maybe it's digital, maybe you have like some poster paper on the wall and you use index cards or sticky notes for the events that go on that timeline. Those are some things that come to mind there. I also think flowcharts are a pretty interesting format for history because I think they can get at cause and effect. So, I mean, I think what's interesting about history is that, you know, there's some event that happens, but like where a timeline kind of shows the sequence of events in this linear format, I think what you can get at in a flowchart is like the different impacts that might result from a single event. So one thing happens, but then that one action maybe has like this impact in one part of the world, this impact in another part of the world, this impact somewhere else. And then those can continue like cascading and kind of you could keep that flow chart going. And maybe at some point they might even like come back together. Yeah, so to add some labels here, what's great about a timeline is that it does a really good job of capturing a sequence of events. Why does the word like sequence? I just had a really hard time spelling that. Timeline is great for sequence of events. Flowchart is great for kind of cause and effect. I also think there could be some interesting ways to use maps, like actual maps. I remember kind of one of the standout assignments in my, oh gosh, what grade was this? So these either like late middle school or early high school. The experience of like drawing very detailed maps of different regions and having to do all of it by hand. So this could be something that you could either, have a reference and do the full drawing of this map of a region of whatever the thing may be, or there could be like the base layer of the map is already provided, and then what students do is kind of different types of annotations based on like what occurs in different regions, things like that. Is that the United States? Am I really that bad at drawing my own country? I feel like California's got to go way lower than that, I think. Florida, California, Texas, all the places. Yeah, I'm bad at that, aren't I? So you could have some labels, different things going on in different places. Julie Ellis mentioned that the central event could also be represented as a scene, and issues that led to the event could be shown as inputs above the central event. Yeah, I think like both within the timeline and the flowchart, like any of these individual elements could be scenes or like portraits too, like quickly drawn portraits of the main players. So maybe so any of those individual elements could have this like added visual punch to them. Awesome. Also catching up with Mr. M in the text chat. The whole class is there today. Won't be able to stay for long, but always willing to join when we can. Glad to hear it. Good to have you here. Yeah, I didn't want to mention the face drawing. If you want to see some, I think I like when I looked back at our face drawing live stream from last Friday. It's not as bad as I thought it was when I was doing them in the moment, but drawing faces can be pretty hard. Good practice though, kind of drawing distinguishing features. And that's also an opportunity too to like focus in on the a specific person. What are the like aspects of that person's life that are relevant in a historical context? An opportunity to like bring those details together. And maybe that'll be the last. I think I want to merge drawing a specific person with kind of a common visual thinking tool, the empathy map. I think the person that I drew, that I referenced throughout the resource kit I mentioned, Sketchnoting in the Classroom, I think I drew Abe Lincoln a bunch, and like to get at a couple of distinguishing features, draw the tall hat and the beard, and you're pretty much there. But what's interesting about the tool of an empathy map is you have like a person's face in the center of this diagram, but then surrounding it, you have these different sections for what that person is thinking, seeing, saying, feeling. You may know from journals, or you can just kind of guess at what that person might be feeling, and hearing. I think empathy maps could be interesting to understand a single person's perspective, or like a particular group of people, what their perspective is. But then if you're studying any sort of conflict, like do this for each side or all of the sides of that conflict to get a sense for where like each person, each group of people, where they're coming from. I think that could be a really interesting way to have a deeper look at any sort of conflict throughout history as a way to understand the different perspectives and put yourself into different shoes. And if you want to do a little deeper dive into that format, that is called an empathy map. So those are 4 formats. Part of me wants to like think of one more suggestion to fill a little bit more of this space here. Other formats for sketchnoting history, you're thinking about what different people have done throughout history, different groups, different parts of the world, different conflicts, different kind of changes in technology, and what happens over long periods of time. That's me just kind of talking through things to see if other formats come up. I think I do have one more suggestion. A way in which you might use a mind map. And this one, I feel like what you could do is kind of in the center of your mind map, probably like maybe you would have an event in the center. And then surrounding that event, you have the typical components of like, okay, who was involved with this event? What happened? Why did it happen? Where did it happen? And when did it happen? Right, so you've got the who, what, why, where, when. And what's fun about the mind map is that, especially when you're using a digital tool, or if you just like start this on a large piece of paper, you can continue branching out in each of those directions as far as you want, right? So, you know, maybe there are like just a couple people involved, but even with those people, you could like include some details about those people, or maybe even like do an empathy map for that person within your mind map. Maybe the when, maybe you just do a couple of details, or if that event spans a period of time, maybe there's a timeline in this part of your mind map. And to keep that theme going, within your where, you could just list the location, or you could draw some sort of a map, like an annotated map. So that's kind of a fun way to think about what you might do with something like a mind map, where you're still kind of capturing all the main ideas and main components of that historical event in this single form, but you've got lots of flexibility with how each of those components are represented and captured. So thank you, Mr. M, for bringing in that great question. I hope that some of these ideas maybe resonated with you. Chances are you're already doing some of this within your classroom, but maybe something here is a new idea for you to try out for an upcoming topic. I'm going to go in and add a underline for each of these distinct sections here. Great stuff. Ooh, yeah, Julie also brings in a kind of special case of a flowchart, which is a family tree. I think that's a relevant and helpful type of diagram for a lot of different moments in history and periods of time. So a family tree could be a specific application of the flowchart. Awesome. Gonna have a little bit more coffee and catch up on the text chat to see if there's anything I missed. Yeah. Sharu has a good question. That might be a good one to dig in next. Could you please suggest a few tips on flow while sketchnoting? I feel somehow I'm able to visualize in chunks the whole talk/session, but I miss the flow. I'm kind of connecting dots. Yeah, that could be a good one to explore next. I missed this one earlier too. Julie mentions that if you're using a visual tool, you could even bring in a real map. Like any of these sketchnoting apps, they all allow you to like add to import a photo. So find a photo of the map, have that be your kind of base layer to your sketchnote, and then you can either sketchnote right on top of that map or add arrows kind of like around it and annotate it in that way. It's a great tip there, Julie. Dr. Vic asks, what's the app you're using? I mean the one in this video right now to teach sketchnoting. Julie is correct. This is Concepts, which is my go-to app these days. Let's switch over, transition to that question that Charu asked about kind of maintaining flow while sketchnoting. And here I'm thinking about, or at least the way I'm interpreting that question is not so much the sense of flow as in being in the zone, but like kind of capturing the flow of information as opposed to just individual chunks. Let me know, Charu, if you're still following along here, if I kind of interpreted your question correctly. I think to start here, I'm going to give myself the opportunity to do kind of some brainstorming around this question before I try to sketch it out. I think this is something I don't think I've done this quite in this way during this live stream. Like, you know, if a question comes, you try to go straight to the answer right away. But I think some more richness or depth might come by allowing for some initial brainstorming and in this case, like me trying to wrap my head around this question before sketching it out and providing an answer. And even just like identifying like the components here. So you mentioned there's this like chunking that can occur as the first stage in your sketchnoting process. And it sounds like you're pretty good at that. Or yeah, you're able to visualize in chunks, but miss the flow of it. And I think what this gets at too is like details versus the big picture. And kind of the challenge of like of a linear information flow. And like a non-linear capture. So I think that's what's interesting about sketchnoting is that, you know, you're listening to a talk or a conversation, or you're reading a book, and as you take that information in, it's this linear thing. It's all coming. It has a direction to it. That information comes to you in a specific order, but then what we're doing as sketchnoters is we're trying to represent and capture that information not just in that exact same linear order. We want to give it this picture that maybe is more impactful or insightful, or like reveals something about that information that you didn't get from just listening or reading. And I think that's what makes sketchnoting or graphic recording hard. It's like giving it this non-linear format, even though it's coming in a linear form. So I think I have two ways to maybe get at what you're hoping to get at here. Yeah, and Charu mentions it's more towards like visual story building of the talk. Yeah. I'm going to move kind of my brainstorming off to the side and share two potential workflows. For the first workflow here, I'm kind of trying to come up with helpful titles on the fly, and I might have described this in some format before this, but yeah, first, if you want to go with kind of like a continuous note-taking, like kind of like a single stage sketchnoting process, I think keeping things modular from the get-go. So what I mean by that is we've already talked about like the chunking that goes on when you're first taking notes. And here I'm kind of thinking specifically of maybe using index cards. To capture each chunk of information. And you know, each of those index cards can have I don't love how this spacing works right now, but I won't get too caught up in that. Each of these, within each index card, as you're capturing each kind of like main idea, you can choose whether to capture that as like a little diagram, or maybe it's just a really powerful quote that you want to capture. Maybe it's a person who says a specific thing that you want to get down. Maybe it's a bulleted list. Maybe it's kind of some sort of a scene that you want to sketch out that has some details to it. That's like the chunking that allows you to focus on kind of like one individual idea at a time. But then since you're doing that in a modular way, you then have the opportunity as you're going, or maybe at the end of that process, that's when you kind of like organize the visual, the overall structure of the notes that you're capturing. So you could sequence, depending on what you want to do with these, even just like sequencing the ideas in a given order as you maybe flip through those index cards. But more likely, maybe you decide you want kind of maybe 3 of the cards are connected or related in some way, and maybe these first 2 lead to that one, this one leads to that one. You kind of do something to like bring all of those ideas into an overarching diagram, or maybe even like an overarching scene. You could draw, maybe there's a helpful visual metaphor that you draw, and then each card lives somewhere within that metaphor. So it's in this next stage that you think about what's the most helpful overarching structure. For those ideas. And what I like about that sequence of questions is that, as you're doing those modular, getting those initial ideas down, maybe just on index cards, you're doing them quickly, you're kind of keeping up with the flow of information. Once you go then to like kind of bring those together into some sort of a diagram or a visual metaphor, you might realize that like, 3 or 4 of those index cards don't really matter as much as I thought they did when I was first capturing those ideas. So those you can like maybe just recycle, maybe like store elsewhere, but they give you this opportunity to kind of focus in on the most important ideas, the most impactful ideas from whatever it is that you're capturing. That is a way that you could kind of do that live, like in the moment, all more or less in like a single stage. The other route that you might go is what I would consider to be like a bullet point first process. So it's kind of similar in that you give yourself this opportunity, like you don't worry about the visuals first. So when you're first filtering, right? Filtering is one of like the major tasks that you do while sketchnoting. Don't worry about visualizing. So you're just You're just capturing these bullet points. You might be able to group them into sections. So maybe there's like a title and then 2 or 3 bullet points related to that that subject, that title, that part of the conversation, but you're just doing the filtering. And then, like once you're done listening to the talk, that's when you give yourself the opportunity to step back and again, decide what overarching structure works well. So maybe this time we could go with something like I don't know, maybe a Venn diagram is useful. And there are kind of certain things that live in each section. And again, you're just looking for like what's a helpful visual reference. And it could be like something more like a flow chart. It could be a diagram. It could be a scene. It could be like one single image. What's a helpful kind of singular, cohesive visual element within which all of the individual pieces can fit. So those are a few ideas for you, Charu. I hope that is helpful. Let us know if anything like that sparks some ideas for you or maybe points to a process that you feel like would work well for you. Julie mentions, on keeping things modular, I'm finding it useful to regularly use the grouping tool after each module is basically complete. It simplifies the lassoing as more chunks populate the node. Yeah, that's a great piece. Great tip from Julie if you're using a digital tool. It's kind of like you're creating your own index cards on the fly. So let's say, I could do this with each of these here. I could select this, imagining that this were like, bigger and had some details to it. With this one here, I think it's the link tool that would allow me to group that object so that I don't have the selection tool easily available with my current tool set. But no matter like what portion of that you grab, it makes it really easy to select and move that chunk. It's a great tip there, Julie. Essentially kind of creating index cards on the fly with a digital tool. Awesome. Sounds like that gave Charu some ideas to work with. I think we might have time for one more question here. So far, we have explored 3. We zoom out. We'll zoom out and get some perspective here. I'll give a recap of where we've been and maybe see if there is one more question that we might explore. We started with a conversation about warm-up routines, how you might weave different elements to get you geared up and ready to go for your next sketchnoting session. Then with Mr. M in mind, we had a discussion about how to maybe like what visual thinking structures, what sketchnoting structures you might bring in when studying history specifically. And then we talked a bit about how you might kind of refine your sketchnoting process to be able to do a good job. I think particularly when like listening to a talk, taking in information linearly, like how can you best capture individual chunks, but also build those chunks into kind of a meaningful visual story. A couple different workflows there. Since we're kind of on the topic of workflow, I think I have a question from the queue that came from a comment or something I had tagged earlier that might be a helpful one to bring in. It's also kind of related to a question that came in earlier today. And that question is, get my scale approximately right. What tools do you use for your digital sketchnotes? I thought this might be a good opportunity to kind of list out a, I think what will end up being like a top 5, but rather than it kind of is a top 5, but it's also more like a top one or two for each category almost. So there's lots of different apps out there that sketchnoters use, that you might want to use for your visual note taking, and which one you use is, dependent on kind of your sketchnoting style, your preferences, what you're using those sketchnotes for. So I'm going to kind of list out 5 different tools here and point to why you might want to use that tool. I will start with the one that I'm currently using. Concepts. Let's do those lines at the end. Whoops. Let's also try to spell concepts correctly. Just thinking ahead. Thinking ahead instead of thinking about spelling correctly. So what I think concepts is great for is infinite canvas mind mapping. You don't have to go with like a mind map structure when using concepts. It's just the one that kind of like I think it lends itself to best because of the way in which you can like zoom out as much as you want. You can keep growing that mind map. You never run out of room. So that's why I use concepts when I'm sketchnoting a podcast, because no matter where the conversation goes, which topics they maybe swing back to when they branch out on a completely new topic, there's always room to keep building out your sketchnote. It's vector based, so you can scale things and move things around. A lot of kind of different export options, which are all very handy. It's a powerful tool. One definitely worth checking out. There are a couple of other ones that kind of fit in a similar... These next two fall into kind of a similar category, so I'll describe them kind of at the same time. These next two are GoodNotes and Notability. I'm going to give myself some room in between those to kind of try to capture the similarity, or these two tools look the most like kind of like a typical note-taking feel. Like in both cases, you've got this toolbar up top. Although I think maybe with Notability, there are some that you can move to the side. But it's generally this kind of top to bottom flow. So this one is great for single column notes. And I kind of distinctly remember how good it felt. Like a little bit ago, after using almost exclusively using concepts for a handful of months, enjoying the mind mapping and like how big you can expand, I hopped over to GoodNotes to do some quick capture. I think I was just like doing some brainstorming at the end of the day, and it was specifically because GoodNotes syncs across iOS devices. Concepts doesn't. Because of the device I was on, I wanted that syncing, so I pulled up GoodNotes to do some sketching. And it was so refreshing just to have that constraint of like, oh, I can't like keep zooming out. I can only go like top to bottom here. And there was something that I really enjoyed about that. That constraint. So sometimes that type of flow, that type of constraint can be really helpful. So that's something to keep in mind. One thing I like about GoodNotes is that there are lots of templates available, including Cornell, if that's a format that you're familiar with. I shared a video about kind of adding sketchnoting elements to the Cornell note-taking technique. So if that is appealing to you, go check out that video, do a little Google search. So with GoodNotes, there's lots of page templates. I think I slightly prefer the kind of the UI, the feel of GoodNotes a little bit more than the feel of Notability. But what makes Notability really stand out is the audio recording feature, which is kind of mind-boggling how powerful it is. Because in addition to just having like the ability to have an audio file associated with your sketchnote, you can actually play back your notes. You can listen back to the audio that you recorded. And you can see your sketchnote being replayed. Like, so it replays your sketchnote like in sync with the audio recording. And you can even like tap any part of your sketch note and it will start playing the audio from that section of your notes. So it's really cool how it syncs with a playback of your notes. So you could even use that playback of your notes. You can use that as a presentation tool. It's almost a quick and dirty way to get some animation going, which is pretty cool. So that's a cool thing about the audio. And with that audio in mind, if the thing that you most often take notes on, if it's lectures or workshops or talks that you're going to all the time, then I think like Notability, it's kind of like a no-brainer, honestly. Like if I were in school, like in a college environment, or maybe even like if I had a daily or weekly meeting at work where I wanted to be able to listen back to the conversations that took place and see the notes that I took, going with Notability would be a no-brainer in that situation. And I think the only reason that I tend to lean toward GoodNotes right now is because I don't need that audio feature. And I like the look and feel of GoodNotes slightly more than Notability. But both of those are good options. And if the recording of audio is at all helpful to you, for sure, go with Notability. 2 more tools I want to mention. So, Concepts kind of lives in its own category of like infinite canvas mind mapping. GoodNotes and Notability are the second category of like a note-taking tool. The next one I'll mention is Procreate. Which was kind of the first app that I got into. I think partially because when I started using digital tools for my sketchnoting, this was a common one among other sketchnoters. Sorry, I keep meaning to select things, not move the canvas around. What makes Procreate stand out is it's much more of like a illustrative tool. So like a lot of the features, there's a attempt at drawing a paintbrush there. So because it's kind of like a drawing tool first, Procreate is great for a more illustrative approach. So if you really want to lean into the drawings and the illustrations, have lots of color and brush and blending. You can even, in many of these tools, you can create your own brushes. Procreate also has a kind of marketplace for different type of brushes. But yeah, if you enjoy like the illustrative side of sketchnoting, then Procreate is a good option for you. Somewhat like Notability, it's a little bit different feel to it. Procreate also has the ability to like export a time lapse. of your project, like of how all of the marks came together. So that can be a cool like behind the scenes of how you made whatever it is that you made. So Procreate is a good option. The final digital sketchnoting app that I will mention today is Miro. Miro falls within a different category compared to the others that I've shared so far. So I'm trying to give, some my top suggestions for each of the kind of broad categories of apps, at least from my perspective. What makes Miro interesting and helpful is that it's a collaborative tool. It's a collaborative whiteboard app. Folks can access it from different devices, from a browser. I've been using this for one-on-one coaching calls that I've been having about sketchnoting. Keep an eye on let's see, right now at least, the latest new video that I posted to the YouTube channel. The latest video that's not a live stream was one of these coaching calls. And I shared the Miro board throughout the coaching call. So check out that video if you want to get a sense for what Miro looks like. But it's just a cool app that allows for, multiple people to contribute to the same board at the same time. There's kind of a learning curve, maybe more so than any of the other apps. There are more things that you can do with Miro, so there's a learning curve involved. So I think it's best suited for maybe like a team of folks working together over weeks or months, so that it's worth it for each of you to get to know this tool well, and then you can use it together over time. It's a little bit harder if you're in a situation maybe where you're, hosting a workshop. And if you have to like teach people to use the tool Miro every single time, like there's new people always popping in, that would be a challenge for using a tool like that. You could maybe get good at identifying just a few of the features of Miro to make a group collaboration session useful. So there might be a way to like identify the most important things to know about that tool to bring people up to speed. But again, it's that like team environment that I think Miro would work really well for. So while there are plenty other apps out there, my hope with this list is to narrow down your search, at least in the beginning, and give you something to start with so that you actually get to sketchnoting as opposed to trying to find the perfect app, because it doesn't exist. So my suggestion would be, don't look for the perfect app. Find one that works good enough and use it for 6 months. That will allow you to actually like test the full bounds of it, know what it feels like to get comfortable with a specific app, get some proficiency with it. And at that point, you can kind of broaden your perspective and maybe see if there might be a different one that suits your needs better. But these 5 here are all great starting points. So based on my brief descriptions here, and maybe like a couple of YouTube demos, if you want to see what any of these look like in action, use that as a starting point, and then just like run with it. Get to sketchnoting as soon as possible and get away from just tool experimentation. So I hope that brief overview is helpful and helps you decide which app to run with first. Five minutes to spare. I'll do some catching up in the text chat and have a little bit of a convo before we sign off for today. Charu asks a related question. Do you like digital more or analog? Right now, I am enjoying digital more so than analog. I think I'm a little bit in, let's see, I guess it was like in 2020 when I kind of made a full shift over to digital, and I still feel like I'm almost in like an experimental phase of pretty much only using digital tools for my sketch notes to see like what the bounds are with that limitation. There occasionally, way less frequently than I think I would have expected beforehand, occasionally I do feel like I need pen and paper to do something, and maybe I will like grab some index cards and like or just do some writing in a notebook, but that's been pretty infrequent. So for the most part, with the tools that I've explored, I'm finding good fits for the purposes that analog note taking used to serve. Yeah, so I've got like, I use concepts for infinite mind mapping. I use GoodNotes for stream of conscious journaling every morning. So I've got a place to do some pure writing, handwriting, journal format. I've got Miro for those coaching calls. I don't really use Procreate right now. So it's pretty much just concepts, GoodNotes, and Miro that are the three tools that I use. And because of the different features they provide and the different experiences that they facilitate, I'm finding that those three meet my needs for the time being. I'm sure at some point I'll get tired of digital and I'll want like the experience of going analog, and I'll weave that back in some way, shape, or form. But right now I'm enjoying the digital deep dive. Christopher James says, "Hi Doug, I use my Remarkable e-ink tablet to sketchnote. It is literally a substitute for paper, nothing else." Yeah, Remarkable is really cool. I haven't ever used it myself, but I've seen others use it in cool ways. So if you want the closest experience to pen and paper, then check out Remarkable. It's a tablet. So it's like an iPad, or I should say, like what you could do is instead of getting something like an iPad, you get this Remarkable tablet. And it's just kind of like this more stripped down experience. There's not like an infinite number of apps for you to download, and like you can't watch YouTube on it. It's like just for your own writing and note taking. And it's a digital tablet that's kind of specifically built to get as close to the pen and paper feel as possible. So one of these days I'll go to a store and try it out, or find a way to get some hands-on experience with Remarkable, because I've heard good things. Had another question that we might try to do a deep dive on at some point. Can you please give some suggestions for a med student? And Julie chimed in. There are some really good YouTubers sharing their way of note-taking in med school. Samuel Shuresh is one I've been impressed with. Yeah, his videos are so like freaking good, and his notes from med school are really good. Check those out. Also, Ali Abdal, I would agree. Those are two good YouTubers to Google, and then go down that rabbit hole and see if they fill in your gaps. And probably once you watch those two folks, you'll probably get a lot of other recommendations on YouTube for folks that are note-taking in med school, but maybe even specifically doing like interesting visual note-taking in the med school setting. Awesome. Good live stream today. Thank y'all for hanging out. I hope that you enjoyed exploring these topics of what tools to use for digital sketchnoting. We also explored how to capture kind of the flow of information in a story and not just in individual chunks, and maybe specifically how to go from the chunks to the story. And we explored sketchnoting, the subject of history, and warm-up routines for sketchnoters. A couple of ways to dive deeper. I meant to mention this way back over here. Sorry to be moving all over the place. If you would like a deeper dive into the topic of digital sketchnoting, that's the latest course that we've developed at Verbal to Visual. It's literally called Digital Sketchnoting. And there's currently a 9-week live workshop version of the course that's available. So you'll get to see these weekly webinars where we walked through like all of the typical tools and features that exist within digital note-taking apps and how best to use them, how to like kind of map the features of these tools to a specific sketchnoting process. So if you want that deeper dive, consider joining Verbal to Visual, because you'll get to work through not only that digital sketchnoting course, we've also got a bunch of other courses for you to explore and a cool community of folks like Julie sharing their work and having conversations there. So check that out if you want to dive deeper. That's my little plug for a Verbal to Visual membership, which is what supports me doing live streams like this and making videos here on YouTube. So do explore that. And stay tuned. We'll be exploring more sketchnoting topics throughout the week. I will be back live streaming on Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday this week, starting at 10 a.m. Pacific time each of those days. We skip Wednesday here on YouTube because that's when we have our weekly workshop inside of Verbal to Visual. That's the opportunity for you to hop on a Zoom call and share your work, ask questions, and participate in a fuller way in these conversations, which is a lot of fun. So there's another reason for you to maybe check out what Verbal to Visual is all about. If you go to verbaltovisual.com, you can find details for that. Add a /events if you want to see the topic for the specific Wednesday workshop that's coming up. That's probably a good amount of plugging for today's live stream. So with that, I will wrap it up. Thanks again, everyone, for hanging out. I appreciate those participating in the text chat. This is fun. Great session, says Julie. I appreciate it. Thanks for hanging out, Julie, and Subham, and Christopher, and Charu, and Mr. M, and Dr. Vic. Good crew. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good